Rome was not born a giant, it began as a small city surrounded by enemies who wanted to crush it. For Rome, to live was to fight. Every neighbor was a rival, every border a potential battlefield. Survival was not guaranteed, it had to be earned with blood, iron, and an unbreakable will to win. This constant struggle forged the Roman spirit. They learned early that peace was a luxury, and the only way to secure their homes and their future was to be stronger, tougher, and more ruthless than anyone else. This wasn't just about conquering. It was about not being conquered, a desperate battle for existence that turned a small Italian city into a global power. This relentless pressure shaped every part of Roman life. The farm was a training ground, and the citizen was a soldier in waiting. They understood that weakness invited attack, so they built a society that valued strength, discipline, and duty above all else. Every victory was a breath of relief, but it only brought them into contact with new, more powerful enemies. From the hills of Italy to the vast deserts of the East, Rome's story is one of endless war. It is a story written not in ink, but in the clash of swords and the marching of legions, a testament to a people who fought for their very survival and, in doing so, ended up mastering the known world. The Roman army was the most fearsome fighting force of its time. It was not just a group of brave men, it was a professional, highly organized machine of death. The legionary, the backbone of this army, was a citizen soldier who dedicated his life to the service of Rome. He was equipped with the best gear available, a large shield called a scutum, a short stabbing sword called a gladius, and javelins called pila. This equipment was designed for one purpose, to work perfectly in the chaos of close-quarters combat. The legionaries fought as a unit, their shields locked together to form an unbreakable wall of wood and steel. What made the Roman army truly terrifying was its discipline and training. Soldiers drilled relentlessly, marching for miles in full armor, practicing formations until they could move as one single entity. They were taught to obey orders instantly without question, even in the face of certain death. This iron discipline allowed Roman commanders to control their armies with incredible precision on the battlefield. Beyond the battlefield, the Roman army was an engine of engineering and logistics. Roman soldiers were not just fighters, they were builders. At the end of every day's march, no matter how deep in enemy territory, they would construct a fortified camp complete with ditches and walls. They built roads that stretched across the empire, allowing them to move troops and supplies with incredible speed. They constructed siege engines like catapults and battering rams that could tear down the strongest city walls. This ability to project power and sustain campaigns far from home made them almost unstoppable. The symbol of this power was the eagle, the aquila, the standard of each legion. Losing the eagle was the ultimate disgrace, a stain on the honor of every soldier in that unit. They would fight to the last man to protect it. This symbol represented the spirit of Rome itself, its pride, its power, and its divine right to rule. When enemies saw the eagles advancing across the field, they knew they were not just facing an army of men. They were facing the full might and fury of the Roman Empire, a force that had been perfected through centuries of brutal warfare and was now coming for them. One of Rome's deadliest struggles was the Second Punic War, a titanic conflict against its great rival Carthage. The war was defined by one man, Hannibal Barca, a military genius who swore an oath as a child to destroy Rome. He did something no one thought possible. He marched his army, complete with war elephants, from Spain, over the treacherous Pyrenees mountains, and then across the freezing snow-covered Alps. This incredible feat caught the Romans completely by surprise. They expected to fight him in Spain or Africa, not in their own backyard. Hannibal had brought the war directly to the heart of Italy. The danger of this campaign was immense because Hannibal was a master strategist who repeatedly outsmarted the Roman generals. He inflicted a series of crushing defeats on the legions. At the Battle of the Trebia and the Battle of Lake Trasimene, he used clever traps and ambushes to annihilate entire Roman armies. But his greatest victory came at Cannae. There he faced a Roman force almost twice the size of his own. Using a brilliant tactic, he allowed his center to fall back, luring the Romans into a trap. Then his cavalry smashed the Roman flanks, and his infantry enveloped them completely. It was a massacre, one of the bloodiest days in military history. The defeat at Cannae was a disaster that would have broken any other power. Rome lost tens of thousands of its best soldiers in a single afternoon. Hannibal was now roaming freely through Italy, burning farms and turning Rome's allies against it. The city was gripped by panic. Its very survival was in doubt. This was Rome's darkest hour. The campaign was so brutal because it wasn't just a distant war, it was a fight for their homes. Hannibal was at the gates, and the Romans had to dig deeper than ever before, refusing to surrender even when all seemed lost. Rome's response showed its incredible resilience. Instead of facing Hannibal in another massive battle, they adopted a new strategy. They avoided him, shadowing his army and waging a war of attrition, slowly wearing him down while they rebuilt their own strength. They took the fight to Spain and then to Africa, forcing Hannibal to finally leave Italy to defend his own home city. The Romans had weathered the storm. They had faced one of the greatest military minds in history on their own soil and survived. This brutal, terrifying war taught them how to endure, how to adapt, and ultimately how to win no matter the cost. The Gallic Wars, led by Julius Caesar, were another of Rome's most brutal campaigns. Gaul, which is, well, modern-day France, was not a unified country but a patchwork of powerful and fierce tribes. These were warrior societies that valued bravery and freedom above all else. They were skilled horsemen and fearsome fighters who fought with wild courage. Caesar's invasion was not a simple war of conquest. It was a 9-year struggle against a whole people who refused to be subdued. The sheer scale of the conflict, covering a vast and difficult territory against hundreds of thousands of warriors, made it incredibly dangerous. Caesar's campaign was a masterclass in Roman military strategy, but it was also exceptionally ruthless. He pushed his legions to the limit, fighting year-round in harsh weather and unfamiliar terrain. The Gauls, led by brave chieftains like Vercingetorix, often united against the Roman invaders, presenting a massive threat. The danger was constant. Roman legions were ambushed in dense forests, their supply lines were cut, and they were often surrounded and outnumbered. Caesar had to be brilliant and brutal to survive. He used a strategy of divide and conquer, pitting tribes against each other, and when that failed, he used overwhelming force. The climax of the war came at the siege of Alesia. Vercingetorix had gathered the last great Gallic army inside a heavily fortified hilltop town. Caesar's army was not large enough to storm the fortress directly, so he did something extraordinary. He built a massive wall of fortifications 11 miles long around Alesia to starve them out. But then a huge Gallic relief army arrived to attack the Romans from the outside. Caesar was now trapped between two enemy forces. He ordered his men to build a second wall facing outwards to defend themselves. The Romans were now the ones under siege. The final battle was a desperate, bloody affair fought on two fronts. The Romans were attacked from both sides simultaneously in a chaotic, swirling melee. Caesar himself rode into the thick of the fighting, his red cloak making him a target to rally his exhausted men. Through sheer discipline and Caesar's tactical genius, the Romans held their ground and shattered the Gallic relief force. Seeing this, Vercingetorix surrendered to save his people from starvation. The Gallic wars were over. It was a brutal campaign that cost the lives of perhaps 1 million Gauls and enslaved another million, a grim testament to the terrifying efficiency of the Roman war machine. One of the most savage and personal conflicts Rome ever faced was the rebellion of Boudicca in the province of Britannia. After the king of the Iceni tribe died, the Romans ignored his will, flogged his wife, Queen Boudicca, and assaulted her daughters. This act of profound disrespect and cruelty ignited a firestorm of vengeance. Boudicca, a charismatic and imposing warrior queen, rallied her people and other British tribes who were suffering under Roman rule. This was not a calculated war for territory. It was a furious, hate-fueled uprising aimed at driving the Romans from the island and destroying everything they had built. The danger of this rebellion was its speed and ferocity. Boudicca's army, a massive horde of enraged warriors, swept through the Roman province like a wildfire. They were not interested in taking prisoners or capturing towns. They wanted to annihilate them. They first marched on Camulodunum, which is modern Colchester, the Roman capital, and burned it to the ground, slaughtering every man, woman and child. Then they turned on Londinium and Verulamium, that's London and St. Albans, repeating the massacre. The Roman governor, Suetonius Paulinus, was hundreds of miles away and his legions were scattered. The province was on the brink of collapse. The Roman 9th Legion tried to stop Boudicca's advance, but was ambushed and almost completely wiped out. The news sent shockwaves of fear through the Roman world. It seemed that a distant foggy island at the edge of the world might actually defeat the might of Rome. The brutality of the campaign was shocking, even by Roman standards. Boudicca's warriors gave no quarter, and their rampage left a trail of smouldering ruins and immense death tolls. For the Romans, stationed in Britain, this was a desperate fight for survival against an enemy fueled by righteous fury and a deep desire for revenge. The final confrontation came when Suetonius Paulinus, having gathered his available forces, chose a battlefield that would give his small, disciplined army an advantage. He picked a narrow gorge with a forest behind him, preventing the much larger British force from surrounding him. As Boudicca's horde charged, the Romans held their ground. They unleashed their pila, which tore through the charging warriors, and then drew their swords and advanced in their tight, disciplined formations. The professional Roman soldiers carved through the disorganized tribal army. The rebellion was crushed in a single horrific battle. While Rome won, Boudicca's fury served as a bloody reminder that the price of empire was eternal vigilance and brutal suppression.